What is up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Welcome to the Sunday Open with Nick4aTick. I am Nick. How are we all doing? It's good to be here. It's good to be doing this. Unfortunately, I wish it was on a better day. It is a happy Mother's Day to everybody out there. Every mom, my wife, all those wonderful women in our lives. I do want to wish everybody a happy Mother's Day before we even get going here this evening. So if you haven't already, there is still time to go out and do something nice. Give a phone call, a text message at the very, very lowest effort possible thing you could ever do. But there is still time to do something special for our favorite women in our lives. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already, send some flowers, go out and drive some over, do something special for that wonderful person that has made our life so special. So once again, quick shout out to my wife and my mom out there. I wish I could be spending it with you guys and not necessarily doing market prep, but that's what we're here. And I think this is potentially going to be a uneventful evening. I don't know about you guys. If you haven't been paying attention or you didn't see the latest news hot off the presses from our lovely administration, allegedly, there is a China deal in place, or we're starting to work one out. So we'll see how that affects the open. I would imagine we get a violent gap up, at least to the initial reaction. But is this one of those situations where we get a eventual sell the news? I don't necessarily think it might be, but the market loves to do weird things that makes us all look stupid until it's hindsight, and then it looks like the easiest possible trade in the world. So let's talk a little bit about last week before we get into the open here in a few minutes. So let's jump to my charts. There we go. There's my charts. And there's a lovely poll in the chat for everybody. If you have an idea, I would imagine we're going to have a very overwhelming support for a gap up this evening. If you're a fan of Week in Wall Street, or just event volatility that happens over the weekend that provides us something possibly to trade, this could be a good one to the upside. So let's take a peek. Last week specifically, how did we all handle this? In hindsight, this was a very balanced, very organized, orderly, just kind of chop and hope for the best, if you will. We didn't even quite make it back up to go retest 5800s. We pretty much were just stalled and chopped and balanced, and really we're in kind of a double distribution, maybe even a third distribution up there near the high. But for the most part, a pretty uneventful week. We didn't move a whole lot. We closed inside of value, and this is a situation where the gap up may push us out of this little range that we were in all of last week. But until we kind of leave this area, I don't have a discernible edge. That's why I didn't even move my pivot from last week. It's still sitting exactly at April's value area high. So the gap up is going to tell us a lot, likely, as far as the amount of enthusiasm that this market may have to continue to take us higher and go retest some of these old levels, going back to obviously the Liberation Day high up here towards 5830s, but even heading back up to some of these weeks that we were just kind of melting down off the February OPEX, and just were kind of continuing to stair step and move the entire weekly range, down a rung before the bleeding kind of stopped. And then obviously we had Liberation Day sending us all the way back down. So now we potentially talk about retesting some of these value areas from the previous weeks, going back to early March, the later parts of February. So specifically, I mean, for me to really get not necessarily too bullish, but I would really love to see us start to build some volume, basically back above this 5750s, and kind of go retesting some of these 5800 spots to kind of break us out of this old kind of near term bottom before we got more clarification on tariffs. And obviously the market was trying to rebid off of that towards these 58, 35, 36s even. So I'm very curious where the gap up may take us. And as high as it may go. And even in the early parts of this week, I think there may even be an announcement on kind of further clarification on what day is today? Today's the 10th, I believe. Today's the 11th. So tomorrow, the 12th, I believe they're actually going to maybe announce details. We'll see. Everything kind of loves to get kicked down another day or two, and they love to kind of tease things. But until there's actual, I would say, something in writing that we see, it's really, really hard to not think maybe we might get another larger time or longer time frame seller back in this market to continue to keep us tightly knit. But given whatever the reaction may be off this open, I'm not looking to get too bearish at all, until we fall back into this old Liberation Day balance area, back inside basically the 55.50s spot on ES. So, and we do still have that unfilled gap going back to even 53, what is that, 53.40s? That the market may, honest to God, it never even fill. It's very possible that we could just take off and, this gap could stay stuck here for the next, for a very long time if we don't actually retest some of these areas going back the last few weeks. So, looking at this, I mean, even last week, we were pretty much just wedged between the last week's value area high and the value area low. That's literally where we settled on the week. And we really didn't get any new information. There were a number of tweets kind of teasing that this deal was going to happen, but it really was kind of lackluster pops, and then we'd fall back into value. So for me, like I said, to get bearish, I really need to see this coming back into the 5,500, specifically inside 55.50s. I would be looking to see us potentially go fill this gap, potentially go retest some of the bottom edges of these value areas. But I would imagine, just a hunch, and the market could easily prove me a liar in the next 8 minutes, but I would expect us to gap up somewhere above last week's high, just at the very least. I would be a betting man, kind of assuming we're going to move higher, or if not a massive gap up, just continue to kind of be bid at least in the early part of this week. If it were to peak above back up to these 5,800s and we got a more violent sell back into this balance, I might be thinking we could continue to kind of trade lower. But it's really hard to, everybody now is bullish. I think after this announcement, at least from what I've seen in the last 12 hours, on the internet and on X and everywhere else, everybody is just talking about a gap up and go, and we're going to leave everything behind. So we'll see. We'll see if all of these sellers going back to the previous all-time high, how serious are they? Are there areas inside the, I would say, 6,000 and below, where we're going to get a longer time frame seller back in this game and potentially looking to once again push us back down the elevator shaft? I don't know. And then frankly, I don't really care as far as my day trades go. I mean, I still may take some shorts, but for the most part, I'm looking for a decent dip. If we do get a gap up somewhere back in maybe possibly last week's value area high, if we are trading above this area, something that allows me to kind of get long, at least in the early part of this week, to try to capture a larger move to the upside. But something in me just isn't sitting right. I would say that's not just, hey, let's full port and buy calls and, we're going to march to a new all-time high. I do possibly see that too, but for some reason, the lackluster reaction to the possibility of these meetings, and every time they've kind of teased it, it's just something doesn't sit right with me. And maybe I'll miss the early part of this rally, and that's totally fine with me. I'd much rather it be confirmed, us making a march back up towards 6,000s, and I can easily try to ride this to a new all-time high. But I just don't love it in this general area below 6,000s, that it's just everybody is just getting super, super bullish, when every single time this announcement was, we were kind of teasing deals and talking about, okay, well, now the tariffs on China are just going to be 80% instead of 145%. All of those things, just, you're not seeing like the most enthusiasm from buyers to just go break out of this area and continue to start, marching forward, that everything is fine, all things are good, and we're all gonna, get rich off buying these dips. So Yeah, for the time being, it's just it's kind of wait and see for me. Like I said, I'm a little more I'm leaning bullish this week, but obviously it's hard not to. But I guess I'm cautiously bullish is probably the words I would use. Without getting too gung ho about it, I'm just thinking more intraday. Can I find decent dips to buy to get long rather than looking to short pops out of this area? I just think that would be a fool's errand versus waiting for those consolidations, waiting for those pullbacks, and finding good areas to kind of get along with this trend. Because even though we were very much inside balance, if we do break this to the upside, even on a gap, you just don't necessarily want to fade this, especially an entire week of just consolidation. If we pop up and came back in, that's probably where I'm a little hands off, but I'm continuing to kind of see this as, hey, we're going to go start retesting some of these old balance areas going back the last few weeks, few months. So maybe they'll shock the world and we'll gap down and it really will be a sell the news event, but obviously I don't see that happening. So we got three and change minutes until the Sunday Open actually kicks off. So while we're waiting here, I'm going to jump to NQ, but while we are waiting, if you haven't already, please do hit the thumbs up button. It does help support this stream, help everybody behind the scenes, continue to push out good programming for you guys here on NinjaTrader Live. So I would very much appreciate it. Everybody smash that thumbs up button before we even really get going here on tonight's show. And thank you all. Full influencer. It's Mother's Day. I know we all could be doing much better things with people we do care about. But the market never sleeps, apparently, when we get in those headlines all throughout the weekend. So I'm going to actually, when we do get to the Sunday Open here for Globex, I am actually going to jump to my execution chart so we can see it. Maybe I'll have to scrunch this way down so we can actively see it, but we'll actually watch it on a shorter time frame chart as well. But before we have a few minutes, let's talk a little bit about NQ. NQ, very similar to ES as far as basically trading in a double distribution, but for the most part, balance all of last week, still closing inside the value area, settlement right around last week's value area high at 20,001, let's call it 150s just for, or 140s rather, just for good measure. The same thing is true here on NQ. Until we break below 19,700s, I have no interest in really trying to short this outside of scalps, intraday moves, just little things here and there. If we do see larger sellers in this market, even on the intraday, scalps to the downside, absolutely. But it's hard. Yes, I mean, maybe, but NQ with just everything in tech, it's hard for me to really want to short this for a larger move. I just don't see it happening unless we can actively break that same 700s area, even as low as 500, before you'd really might see sellers trying to take us much, much lower. So for the most part here, I don't know from a gap up perspective how high we may go, but an area to watch is going to be as low as 20,420s and as high as I would say the 20,530s. We could absolutely gap above this. And then we're talking about some of these older areas, even as high as 21,000 I could see in the early parts of this week if we do get that continuation off a gap up. But those are at least the intermediate areas as we're talking tonight, as we're talking Globex, basically that 400 to 700s area is something I'd be watching cautiously to see does somebody actually reoffer in those general spots. Obviously that Liberation Day high was kind of in power hour before, obviously after hours just start, or that wasn't Liberation Day, excuse me. Or was it? No, Liberation Day was actually back here. Sorry. Oh, we are open. And we did gap up right in the middle of that to 20,460. Let's see it on you. Let's go to yes. And it's my execution chart. It's not loading. Of course it's not loading. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to have to reload the data. So we'll do that later. I guess we're not going to see it on my execution chart. I thought this would actually load. It didn't last week either. So I got to figure out why that happens to me. But yes, gapped up just slightly to last month's high so far. Looks like we wicked just below it at 57.69 and 69 evens. Okay. And then are kind of just slowly coming back down. So we'll keep going here. Actually, I know settlement was 300 points lower. But in a weird way, I kind of expected more. I know that's a 1.5%, but I weirdly thought we might go a little higher. So the high of that old, whatever you want to call this, near-term consolidation where we were trying to get back in up towards 21,000, we came right up to 20,540. So an area I would have marked on my chart is that high, just to kind of watch it, as well as that 420 spot would be that value area from that week that we were continuing to kind of consolidate and chop around that 350s to 400s kind of spot. So, lost my crosshairs. There we go. So given that we have gapped up, I mean, shocker, I don't think anybody wasn't expecting that. In fact, 76% of you in the chat were saying gap up, 12% were saying gap down, 10% was saying flat. So the gap ups have it. They did get that correct. So we did gap up 1.5% on NQ, 1.25% on ES, kind of coming back down just slightly on ES, about 20 points since that initial wick to the upside. So this is what it's very, very early, but this is kind of what I was talking about of just, hey, do we go start retesting these? And then what happens? Do we just have buyers just continuing to stream us out of the gate? Or do we come back to an area that makes sense? So down here, 450s, 420s, all the way as high as 550s, 540s. And do we see it cool off a little bit, maybe come back into last week's range? In which case we kind of look for longer time frame sellers. Are they present? Do they push us back into this range? And then it gets a little interesting. If this announcement, I mean, maybe the market waits for the details, but if it doesn't really kind of give us a ton of momentum, then yeah, I would expect us to fall back into this range. As I said, they teased it so many times, I feel like the last week and a half we just weren't able to kind of make that move that you would hope for, expect. So, like I said, I'm cautiously bullish for this exact type of reason that maybe somebody large comes back into this market, but we'll see. We'll see how things shake out in the overnight, and obviously important to watch the the early parts of tomorrow's session, even into Tuesday. And we'll talk about some other things that are on the docket this week as well for data releases, earnings, and other things on tonight's show as well. But for the most part, shocker, we gapped up, and we'll have to watch to see, do we start to clear out some of these old value areas going back the last few months. But hey, we're leaving that range, at least for the early part of this week, it seems. And I may actually talk about cattle. I haven't looked. I saw a headline. I just wanted to see a weird product that we don't usually talk about, that we don't usually trade. I saw a headline that was talking about stopping imports of cattle from the southern border due to illness in some of the cows. And I was just curious, something I don't watch, to actually see, what does that actually do when the market's open? Like, if you hadn't seen, like, cattle has just been like straight bid the last few weeks. So what is a news event in something in the agricultural sector actually do? And I wanted to actually see it and just take a peek. So maybe we'll talk about cattle here if there actually was a move. I don't ever really look at it. I've only traded it once as a joke, but I want to see, just because I saw that headline earlier today, and I'm actually curious to see how it opened. So we're going to jump to crude oil. Not a ton to talk about. If you guys remember last Sunday, we had that vicious gap down, kind of retested support at 55.30s, which was basically last week's low was the Sunday open. And we had talked about this being a balance range for the last few weeks and potentially looking for longs. At least you could feel confident at least having a balance range type of bottom in that area. And you got that exact move. So we did kind of, I think we gapped down, we came back up to 55.80s, 55.60s as we were doing the show. And I was talking about looking for a long in this kind of the bottom edge of this balance range, potentially to see, do we traverse it and potentially go back up towards these last few weeks of consolidation up here towards, I think I was talking like 60, maybe 62 at the absolute highs. So we got that move in this week. And in which case, if you took that trade, you'd be looking to lighten up in this area, knowing this is that bottom edge from 2 weeks ago that, you know, we were kind of holding. Are we going to see longer time frame sellers once again step back in and push crude potentially to go retest some of these areas of last week? Maybe April's value area low back down here towards 58.70s. Very, very possible. But for the most part, since we got that exact move, that's very constructive, at least maybe forming a near-term bottom in the bloodbath that has been crude oil, going back since the drill baby drill narrative going from January from this administration, you know, came about. So with that, more supply potentially and crude just kind of falling down the elevator shaft. So good to feel that I was right on one of these logical trades that kind of makes sense, just taking away the product itself and just thinking structurally from volume profile, how could I trade this? Well, you're long off a balance area that somewhat makes sense as a bottom area of support. So from here, looking at it, I mean, I wouldn't be looking to do a whole lot. I'd be watching for a reaction in crude around that 62s to 62.10s. This value area low going back those 2 weeks at 60, what is that, 62.08, to potentially see what does the market kind of choose to do. If we get it back above it, then there's possibly a trip to go retest those highs. Kind of that, sorry, not highs, the value area high from that week and the top edge of this balance range heading to 63.20s. So a decent read. We are kind of in the middle of this range. I don't necessarily love interacting at this general spot, but if we peaked up a little higher, maybe there's a reaction at 62 where we see some buyers stepping back in to kind of go retest the very top of this balance range. But if not, nothing wrong with maybe trying another long, somewhere around 60s to, or I guess 60 even to probably the 60-30s, kind of this little RTH gap going back to from Friday as well. So decent idea there, but I would hope this may be, like I said, a more near-term bottom in crude, at least for another week or so. You just never know. It's hard to fight that narrative. And I see things of crude going back. And I think I saw someone with a decent chart that looked like 51s and a few other spots a little lower that they were talking about. So I hope that's not the case. I think below 50s, things get a little weird in the old West Texas out by me. So hopefully that doesn't happen and we can continue to kind of consolidate, maybe go retest some of these upper areas of value back towards that old balance range at the end of last year around 65s. See if we can kind of crack that. The spread on NQ. What's the spread on NQ? I don't have a DOM up. You guys tell me. I'm assuming it's got to be a few points, something absurd. 5 to 6 points. Thanks, Stowe. So yeah, decent opportunity last week in gold, in crude oil to get long. We'll have to see what happens. Like I said, I don't love initiating in this general area necessarily, but we'll see if we can get a reaction at 62. Crude is up trading at 61.44s. So we'll see how that shakes out in the overnight and into tomorrow, see what the open brings us. But for the most part, this is pretty constructive to at least form that bottom around last week's low. So I like that second attempt to go break it, rejection, and now moving back into the last few weeks of value. So good signs there. In gold. Well, we talked last Sunday, about looking for shorts in gold. And boy, the early part of last week would have been absolutely rough if you took that trade. I did take one and I got steamrolled. I had a chance to get out for like a decent small trade. I think I was short whatever it was. Maybe it was like Tuesday or Wednesday. I was short around 34.25s, and we went down to like, I think we cracked into the teens, like 18 or something, and I could have covered it there. I ended up getting stopped out in profit, but it was an order flow based trade that eventually just got popped in the after hours, and then the larger sell came in. So for the most part, it seems like gold is consolidating in a pretty wide balance range. We'll see what if equities continue to be bullish, do people start moving? Do we get the rotation out of gold back into equities and other things? The recession trade, is it somewhat off for the time being? I don't know. But it does seem like gold is very much in a balance range between the higher 3200s, so let's call it 3270s, and as high as I would call it 34s at this point. So you got about 100-point range in gold that we've been consolidating and building a ton of volume in for the last couple weeks. So until that really breaks, it kind of is an intraday trader's mindset where you're fading those edges, looking for opportunities to long gold in this general area, kind of where we are now, where you had a violent wick down, the 3250, almost 3253. Wow, really almost came all the way down. At 30, basically the 3275s, and then you look for kind of getting out or covering a good portion of your trade in the higher 3300s, 3370s, or holding all the way back up towards 3400s. So consolidation, you play the edges, but I'm just a little weary. Now that's a second attempt to go kind of push above and go retest the all-time high up here at 3500s, and now another larger violent reoffer to the downside. Do we start to maybe go crack 32s, possibly go retest this one more time? Very possible. But at least finally, this meteoric rise that gold has been on has slowed down, at least in the last few weeks. We are kind of coming down. You're retesting areas and potentially looking to consolidate. And we'll see what happens if we do break out of this range. As you know, we talk about this. I think Leo was talking about it on Thursday, but those balance breaks can be violent, and you really don't want to fade that first move out of it by any means. Once it kind of breaks, you do want to be along with it. So whether that's another break above 34s, or if we start really kind of crushing below, I would say 3270s, you probably want to be short, at least back down towards the 3200s. But for the most part, my initial gold thesis of shorting it clearly was a little premature. Probably should have made sense to, try it once we, I guess, broke down below 350s, something like that. But I don't know. We'll have to see in the early parts of this week how the China narrative changes our lovely gold buyers, who just have seen the last few months even to never run out of ammo and continue to buy them. It always seems like during the Asia session, we do get a decent bullish move in gold, but I'll see how that continues this week. So, as I said, if we break that balance, do we come down here, retest as low as 3,200? Some of these RTH gaps that we continue to basically be at every century mark, if you will. We just kind of seem to gap up and go above those as we continue to retest them. So we'll see. Do we come back down, retest any of these spots? That's what I'm watching for. That's kind of what I was talking about last Sunday before we just went all the way up to kind of retest 3,400s. But I just am kind of watching this and am cautiously looking, do we potentially have an opportunity to reoffer this between 370s and 350s or that move back down towards 3,200s? All right. So I want to see. Oh, I just realized, I don't even have data on cattle. I just realized that. So I don't think I do. So that's probably pointless. All right. We're not going to talk about cattle. I thought I might have that. So I got to figure out, get agricultural products in my data package as well. All right. So for the time being, I know, Stowe. I was hopeful that I had that planned. I didn't actually, in the back of my head. So we'll talk a little bit about earnings. There's not a whole lot going on this week. Last week, we didn't even get to talk about earnings. We were kind of on we were just talking about markets, and we ran out of time. So I didn't get to talk about what was on the docket. So yeah, I remember with YM too. It's the same problem. I don't realize I don't have data for certain products. And then I'm like, oh, let me talk about this. Let me show this. Oh yeah, the data thing. Does cattle not trade after hours? Maybe that's why. So maybe I do have data. But wouldn't it open? Doesn't ag still open for Sunday at 5? Maybe not. Somebody smarter than me probably know that. I don't trade ag, so we'll figure that one out. Cattle is closed. Okay, so maybe I do have the data. We'll find out. Maybe we'll talk about it tomorrow afternoon. Okay, so as far as earnings for this week, as I said, it is a much lighter week than we've had in the last couple. Last week, it was a single stock trader's dream as far as ways to just be absolutely crushed by theta for a lot of those moves from a number of big names, not necessarily the biggest in the Mag 7, because we were kind of at this point past it, but there are still a decent amount of names this week. The biggest ones to watch, honest to God, that a lot of people will be paying attention to will be Alibaba, Walmart, and probably John Deere. A few others that you could probably throw in here, Cisco, obviously, as well. But for the most part, nothing that's going to absolutely just move the markets in after hours the way, or even in the pre-market, the way some of the others have been the last few weeks. But for the most part, yeah, those would be the ones I would absolutely be paying attention to later in the week on Thursday. Those three big names. Do Monday, NRG, Fox in the pre-market tomorrow. ASCS, yeah. Archer, Hertz, Blink. No, none of those are absolutely going to move the market for a variety of reasons. But yeah, absolutely lighter week this week than kind of what we had last week and kind of the end of the Mag 7. I think NVIDIA reports in a couple weeks. I want to say it's in like 2 weeks. Maybe I'm crazy. But yeah, for the most part, earnings season slowly winding down on the larger names. But Cava reports, everyone's new favorite, Chipotle as well. So, like I said, very, very, very light week. I think, did I miss any other? Under Armour? No. Yep, that'll do it. All right. So on the economic calendar front, the other things to watch for, it is CPI week and PPI week, which I know for a lot of traders, a lot of people love to trade the release and the aftermath. But we'll see if the narrative continues that inflation has been defeated, was defeated 3 years ago at this point, it feels like, going back to 2022's October CPI, which marked the low, I guess. And then November continuing to just kind of send us of that year. I'll never forget those 2 days. Those 2 days taught me a lot about trading. But yeah, so we do have CPI on Tuesday. Tomorrow is very light. We do have a 6-month auction, and we do have Kugler speaking shortly after the bell at 9:25 Central Time. Then the big event, obviously CPI tomorrow or on Tuesday at 7:30 Central. So in the pre-market, do be safe as always. Don't forget about it. If you do like to trade this, Godspeed always is my advice to everybody who loves to trade data releases. That's definitely not my favorite one. It hasn't been as chaotic as it has been in months past, but I just have no interest in trading probably until shortly after the open on Tuesday. But we'll see. We'll see if inflation is still defeated. On Wednesday, we do have some more our favorite Fed members. If you missed their world tour on Friday, they are still back this week. We have Waller and Jefferson talking. Waller talking, must be overseas at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, and then Jefferson at 8:10. Outside of that, Wednesday is a much lighter day. Yep. Our usual crude inventories, or crude imports and production. And then we do have the dailies. We have Fed's daily speaking after the bell. And then Thursday, we move into a plethora of releases with PPI, jobless claims, New York State manufacturing, Philly Fed, retail sales, and a bunch of other variations of said data. So a decent amount of releases that the market and algorithms will have to kind of parse through. But then the big event, potentially. I don't know. I was trying to see what our lovely Fed chairman is talking about, if it's an actual speech on monetary policy from any way, shape, or form, or is he giving prepared remarks, or is he just speaking at a charity event? I literally could not find details exactly what this speech and who he's talking to, where it is, but do be aware our lovely Fed chairman is speaking shortly after the PPI release, 10 minutes after that. So before the market even opens on Thursday, you will have probably some additional volatility as he has a microphone in his hands. The market tends to just move chaotically about, as you remember from Wednesday last week when Trump had to upstage him as well. So we'll see. We'll see how that shakes out. But most of these, or all of them, excuse me, are in the pre-market. So hopefully by the opening bell on Thursday, we do have some calmness in the markets to find some decent trading opportunities. And then after the bell, we will have business inventories at 9 a.m. Central Time. And then later in the day, we do have Barr speaking at 1 o'clock. So decent amount of event volatility in the early parts of Thursday's trading session as well. And then moving on to Friday to round out our week, we do have building permits and housing starts, as well as still one of my favorite event volatilities after the bell, which would be the Michigan consumer sentiment and the 5-year inflation expectations. Every I guess month or every other week, I can't remember if this is, I feel like it's more often than monthly, but every Friday when this comes out, back when I was doing my show before, I always like to remind people this, for some reason, really does provide a wild algospasm, whatever you want to call it, just chaos of illiquidity during that release. And bad things can happen even if you use stops at times. So I always recommend during this release, if anything, because it's after the bell, just be flat, wait for the dust to settle, trade it. It can get pretty violent if you remember back a couple months ago with how bad or how crazy some of the releases were for, I think, 2 in a row. We had some violent volatility to the downside that I think even Leo had to create a decent thread on what happens when basically we revert back to whatever, it's the open price. V-Logic. Yeah. So there's a good reminder. V-Logic has happened and can easily happen again during this release. So just something to be aware of. It's not exactly fun to be violently liquidated out of your position. And yeah, that pretty much wraps out our Friday. So nothing we haven't all faced before. A pretty eventful week as far as data releases, news events, Fed speakers, and the ever evolving trade war situation where headline risk rules it all. So head on a swivel as always, as we are trading. Use stops. Be careful if you're trading around any of these news releases. And yeah, we're going to have a fun week. So let's see, where are we trading? So we still are a bit off the gap up so far. Came up on ES toward 5770s and slowly have just been kind of reoffering and moving back down lower. So we'll see if we make a traverse back down towards last week's value area high, or if the news is sold of a China deal and we just kind of march back down into balance. I don't know. We'll see. How am I feeling about another Sunday gap? So as always, I hate them, especially when they are obviously event driven like this. I love when gaps get filled, and I hate this situation is a little different because we absolutely could just never fill this gap back down in the 5300s and just march to an all-time high, throughout the summer. That would not shock me in the slightest, I guess. That sometimes the market just does things like that. I hate Sunday gaps. You guys know I've been doing this show for a long time, and it always drives me nuts just because it just weirdly is just another psychological magnet that exists that I just weirdly eventually feel like will get filled. So it just takes me out of taking, I guess, longer time frame trades. And I don't know. I hate market structure with those type of gaps, but they happen all the time. We don't always fill them. So we'll see. This is one where if we didn't fill it, it shouldn't shock anybody, but who knows? As I said, as we were talking about this earlier in tonight's show, I really just want to see what happens as we return to some of these higher areas of value back up in the 5800s to see, does somebody large step in and sell us back down? I just want to see a nice volume build and continuation move higher for me to move out of being cautiously bullish, I guess. So we'll see as things evolve in the early parts of this week, but at least in the early part of tonight's session, I mean, who knows, as we get closer to Asia Open in London, do they come back and potentially try to fill the gap in the overnight? And then maybe we're off to the races after the New York Open. We'll see. Or the Cash Open or the RTH Open, whatever it is you call it. Don't want to offend anybody. So all right, so we're getting to the part of the show tonight where if you have questions, if there's something you want me to talk about, dive in a little deeper on, we absolutely can. So feel free to throw some questions into the chat if you have any, as we are kind of in the latter half of tonight's programming. I noticed gaps over 100 points normally don't fill right away, but keep going. Yeah, I could weirdly feel that actually happening, where who knows? I mean, it could take a couple weeks, it could take months. We could get a nice move back up towards 6,000s, and then maybe we get another reoffer that comes back down to the 57s, 56s, and maybe we retest that. But I try not to think about them, but I will say as a trader, it just is always something in the back of my mind when we do have these violent gaps up or down that eventually they just might get filled. So Leo says, statistically, the size of the gap isn't super meaningful. Not to be that guy, but I have from the data. Of course you have, my friend. I'd be curious if anyone knows like the actual percentage of Sunday gaps that do get filled. And actually be interested to know that data. But this is one, like I said, we had this other one going back. I mean, that wasn't a Sunday gap. That was a Wednesday gap based on another one back here, 5300s. But Leo, you are my quant, so I don't know who you're asking, but maybe I should just be talking directly to them. So yeah, we're coming right into last week's high. If we were to kind of break that, I mean, maybe we really do at least make that push back towards this LVN back up here to 5700s on the SPX. I mean, we're still, I guess the size of the gap, like Leo was saying, doesn't necessarily matter, but I don't know. If you were uber bullish on this news, this is not exactly what you want to see, just a gap up and slow pullback with not a lot of enthusiasm yet from buyers. I mean, NQ still kind of holding above the 20,400s, at least for now. But this will be an interesting spot for the week. If you were paying attention last week, there were several pings of the Sunday Open price point throughout the rest of the trading week. So it's still a newer MGI that I've been paying more attention to and taking a couple trades off of here and there, but important price to start having marked on your charts. It's just something that I've been watching more. Obviously, there's a good amount of data, I think, that some of the OFL guys have talked about, but as it's a newer MGI label for me to really be paying attention to and actively be looking to trade off of, I think it holds a lot of weight. I think there's definitely something there, and there's a lot of potential opportunities to, use it to potentially guide trades when we are above it or below it, or potentially marching towards it. That maybe we'll go ping it. So I think it's something that we all should be have marked on our charts if you don't have it auto plotted like I do on mine. Oh, Jim with a good stat. RTH close to RTH open gap up fill on Monday, 55% filled, 2-year look back. Okay. So more than half the time, those gaps get filled on Monday, which is interesting. So NQ, that gap, I mean, it really is 300 plus points. My gosh. Let's see. Let me see if I can grab that. Actually, that's not going to load, is it? All right. I was trying to see. I wanted to grab the trade deal announcement thing that I was seeing on Twitter. I was going to read it, but I realized I'm not going to try to size that and do it all right now. It's all over Twitter if anyone wants to take a peek of it. But I did actually want to see the announcement. Yeah, if you look at the announcement, that seems likely. So, how are we all feeling heading into this week? I'm curious to get the chat's gauge going in. Interesting gap up, slowly drifting back down. And of course, somebody's trying to violently bid 400 according to Stowe. How is the spread, Stowe? I don't have the DOM, so I'm curious. Is it still like 5 to 6 points? Yeah, I'm feeling a little confused too. I think that's why. I mean, I guess I expected more, or a more positive reaction, or a little more continuation off the gap up. But I don't know. We'll see. Leo, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. I get it. I get that we gapped up. Or if anything, it was maybe not as much as a 1.5% gap up, and maybe we just kind of continued to march up off the gap rather than just gap up. And now we're just going to reoffer all night. And then I'm going to see that we're trading inside this balance range, inside the 20,200s when I wake up tomorrow morning, aren't I? You know what I mean. Oops. I think I lost my mic there for a second. So yeah, I guess it really is going to be one of those Globexes where we just gotta kind of wait and see. I don't know if I want to. I mean, obviously, I wasn't gonna be the first idiot to try to buy this after a 300 or a 1% plus gap up. But we've had the situations where we do get that type of violent move, and we do get continuation up 2%, 3% in either direction. So I guess that's what I mean, Leo. On this way down, how many times did we have, a gap down that eventually went to 2-3%, where it just kind of kept going? So we're going to hear wait and see all week and probably forever, because we have to trade when there's safe opportunities to get long, to get short. If it's not, you just need to be sitting on your hands. So I'm going to be a little wait and see to see, do we get any opportunity to potentially come retest the top edge of last week's balance? I mean, the Fed and everybody else seems to have a wait and see approach. So I'm going to be data dependent, Stowe. That's my plan. I'm going to be data dependent based on the data that price action, order flow, volume, and everything else gives me throughout tomorrow's trading session. Hopefully, it will have given us enough wait and see to find some decent opportunities during power hour tomorrow afternoon. One can only hope. The range is transitory. It's been transitory. We've been slowly transitioning from range to range, and I'm just hopeful and optimistic that we will I know I feel like I've said this the last 3 weeks that we will finally leave the range, but it still goes back to even I think when we were doing the inaugural show here and we were talking about even this gap going back to 5350s, whatever. But I was still looking for us to like, kind of give you that like FU move out of these lows. And I mean, I know this is almost like 1,000 points of range when you really think about it on the S&Ps, but you still kind of want, I mean, that like FU trend day kind of trend week where we are just up and to the right. You've kind of been just looking for that or waiting for that off these lows. And I guess the market has been in true. I mean, I'm going to say it again, the wait and see, because we have had zero clarification on tariffs. And even after tonight, we probably don't, because God knows they're going to change details of the agreement. There's still going to be things to hash out. And, our administration loves to prematurely announce things, which is what we've been doing for the last 2.5 weeks. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm still not impressed. I still am unimpressed by this. So we'll find out, I guess, in the early parts of this week, how serious the market is about actually trying to take us higher. If we can clear 5800s, 5850s, I'm a believer, which is not that far. So we'll see. But that is a violent move above whoever that guy was at 400 Stowe on NQ. I think he just got punched in the mouth a little bit. I mean, I hate this rally too. I'm sure if we do get a violent move into the summer and just continue to kind of march higher, it will be another most hated, violent, slow summer grind up than we've had, and I feel like the last few years. And I make the joke that I'm going to become a part-time lifeguard at a pool instead of trading in the afternoons during July, because it just is not the best trade. You get a lot of weeks like this, and then we kind of close on the highs where we just kind of consolidate shop and just drift a little higher week after week. So we'll see. Still kind of moving lower. We'll have to. I'm really curious to see how this evolves in the overnight and kind of have eyes on it. I know it's Mother's Day. I hope everyone's doing something wonderful for dinner for their significant other or their parents, or spending time with them. Yeah, I'm not impressed with the upside. I know we've just been drifting up, but I'm still not impressed, I guess. Something still irks me. Something is still just keeping me out of just being like full port long, I guess. Like I said, if I miss a portion of it, move to the upside, so be it. I bought some of these lows and longer time frame stuff, 401k things, so I don't feel like I miss the chance to buy this dip, I guess, in things that matter. But as far as a swing trade, yeah, I mean, I'm not in anything, and I will happily miss another 2% up and to kind of confirm this move before I really start looking for, I guess, those type of buys to add. So we'll see. Yes, you are right. So Mother's Day did in fact end for all traders as far as 5:01 Central Time. As soon as the gap up is completed here. Trader X, I don't disagree with you. I know that's kind of why I'm saying, like, if we start to clear that old near-term low, like, do we start to see on the longer time frame a trend change? Like going back to the all-time highs, if we can kind of clear this area, I would say maybe there might be, at least on the intermediate time frame, like, are we going to go kind of retest some of these areas on the lower side of the all-time highs? If we do get, this is kind of why I've said, like, watching the 20,500s, 20,400s, like, do we get that longer time frame guy coming back in and pushing us back down? And then I would agree with you that the longer time frame trend is clearly down. But, with us being more intraday traders, more day traders, I still got to trade what's in front of me, which is still more week by week. And I'm looking to kind of trade the extensions of value areas into another area that makes a lot of sense, which brings us back to kind of where we are, or we gapped up and sold off from, at least in the early parts of tonight. So I don't know. I didn't have a great edge last week, and naturally we consolidated. I don't have a great edge going into this week, and we came back up to the first level we were talking about and kind of wicked it and are coming back down. So I don't know what to do with my hands, I guess is what I'm going to be doing in the early parts of this week. So, any other questions for this evening? If not, guys, we can wrap it up. Everybody can go back to their trading evening, or spending time with their family on this lovely Mother's Day. It's also my anniversary on Wednesday. It was my wife's birthday last week, so I am in a balanced range of holidays in my family. Yeah, Jim, we do have CPI on Tuesday. Maybe that causes us to do something. I mean, I know we talked a little bit about it, but I don't know. The inflation's been defeated for a few years, it feels like. But yeah, here we are still talking about CPI being an important thing to watch. It's something that's still going to move the markets. It'll be interesting to see when that narrative changes or when we really are past it. But obviously with tariffs and things, I guess we're kind of kicking that can, and it's going to matter for coming months again. So I think we'll leave it there. I'll do a quick recap of ES, and we can all go about our Mother's Day and do better things. Hopefully not trading this would be my advice. If you've already had a lovely Mother's Day with your parent, with your mom, or with your wife, the mother of your children, whoever it may be, please go do that instead of trading the rest of this evening. But so on ES, we gapped up above last week's range. We are currently trading right around last week's high. An area I'm watching is still going to be around this 5836s, even as low as I guess what's going to equate to 5800s on the SPX options chain as well, which would be right around here. This 5815s to probably 5820s, depending on the spread this week. It's probably closer to 17 to 15 by the end of the week. So we'll watch that as a near-term high to see, do we get sellers kind of re-entering this market to push us back down? Obviously be watching for that gap fill. But for me to get super bearish, I need to see this break below 5600s and specifically kind of pierce back inside of this old balance range and inside the Liberation Day range, which would cause us to actually want to enter the value area from April. So pivot's still there. It's the bottom edge of last week's range. For me to want to short this to zero, I guess it's got to break inside of that. Otherwise, even intraday, I'm really looking more dips to buy in the early parts of this week. So that'll do it. If there's no other questions, guys, we can wrap it up. If you haven't already, or if you didn't already tonight, please do hit that thumbs up button, hit subscribe. It supports the stream, helps NinjaTrader continue to push out good content. If you've enjoyed tonight's show, I very much appreciate y'all being here, hanging out, spending time away on this Mother's Day to watch the Sunday Open with me and learn a little bit, maybe have a better perspective going into this week, taking a little zoomed out view. I feel like we always get stuck in that 1 minute NQ candle vibe, but for the most part, sometimes it makes sense as we are kind of planning to trade this week to take that zoomed out view and just get a better idea of kind of where we're trading, at least from a slightly more 50,000 foot view. So as always, guys, thank you all for being here. Thank you for watching. Please do tune in to the stream tomorrow morning. I believe Tanya Trades will be trading the open, but the whole NinjaTrader team will be back. Jim himself, I believe, is back. I hope he's back. It's not the same without you, Jim. So we do really appreciate what you do, keeping us all in line and hosting all the shows the way you do. So we very much appreciate you, and we did miss you last week. So hopefully you are back. But yeah, everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you for being here. Everyone trade safe this week. Please go wish everybody, the important women in your life, a happy Mother's Day. And I will see you all tomorrow afternoon to trade the close during Power Hour. So cheers, guys. Have a good night.